Alright, so we're going to do this test review for the logic test. It's your first major test of the 9 weeks, so you want to make sure you have a good grade on this. So you'll notice, first of all, right here, you kind of have all your nodes. It's not going to be that way on the test, if I remember right. But here you it's just a little review. A conditional statement, P implies Q. Converse switches them, if Q then P. Inverse, not P then not Q. Contrapositive switches and is opposite, or switch with nots. Not Q implies not P. And then biconditional is P if and only if Q. So, let's look at number 1. Underline the hypothesis, circle the conclusion. Please remember that you underline after the word if, and then you circle after the word then. Okay? So looking at number 1, I'm looking for the if, and there it is at the beginning. If a person is at least 18 years old, then the person can vote. See how that works? After the if, I underline. After the then, I circle. But number 2 and 3, please notice 2 and 3 do not start with an if. 2 and 3 start with a figure and angles. So I got to look later in the sentence. So on number 2, my if is in the middle, so I'm going to underline after the if. This is backwards, but that's all right. Since there is no then in this sentence, that means the first part of the sentence is the conclusion, so I circle that. This one's backwards because if is in the middle. Same thing with number 3. My if is right there in the middle. I underline after it, and that means the beginning is my conclusion. All right. Now number 4, write the following given the conditional statement. If an angle is acute, then the angle measure is less than 90. So I want you to remember when we're talking about, on number 4, converse, what do? I switch the order, like I'm tying some Converse shoes. Alright? So let's go ahead and write this. I'm going to take this hypothesis and then this conclusion and switch the order. So now it's going to write if the angle measures less than 90 degrees, then an angle is acute. That's it. Took my P right here and my Q right here, and I switched them. That's all I did. Okay. Let's look at the second part. It says inverse. So let's remember what we do for inverse. For inverse, I keep the same order, but I make these opposite. So I call it flipping, but that just means opposite. All that means is I put nots in my parts of my sentence. So specifically, on this one, instead of if an angle is acute, I'm going to keep that P right where it is. But instead of it is acute, I'm going to put if an angle is not acute. Okay? You see how that works? My original statement in the same exact order, but it's going to have opposites. I'm going to use the knots in there. So my second part, my conclusion, the angle measures less than 90 degrees. It's going to be the angle doesn't measure less than 90 degrees. Something like that, where you're giving me the sentence as an opposite. If an angle is not acute, then the angle does not measure less than 90. Okay? Contrapositive, everyone's favorite one, because it turns into a little dance. Remember? So I got my conditional statement. So contrapositive, I'm going to do 2 changes. I'm going to take the order, switch the order, and make it opposite. So again, contrapositive gives us a cool little dance, specifically switching the order and making it opposite. So let's try that. Let's try that on this sentence. If an angle is acute, then the angle measures less than 90. So I'm going to take that conclusion, the angle measures less than 90, bring it to the front, and make it opposite. So it's going to read, if, and it's going to be the angle, and again, it's got to be opposite. So if the angle doesn't measure less than 90 degrees, then an angle is not acute. All right, I switched the order and I made them opposite. Again, if your sentence is a little bit different, but as long as you you don't have to word it the exact way I did, as long as you're making them opposite in some way. Okay. So biconditional. The last thing you got to know for biconditional is that it has to use the phrase if and only if. Okay? So what you do is you don't write the first if, you don't write the then, you're just going to write the hypothesis, if and only if, the conclusion. So I'm going to write it, starting with an angle is acute. No if. An angle is acute. And then what comes next? If and only if. You got to know that phrase for biconditional. Both the conditional and the converse are true. So my conclusion here, the angle measures less than 90 degrees. All right. Number 5. Given the following conditional statement, if two angles are vertical angles, then they are congruent, which of the following statements is the inverse. So again, remember, inverse is same order with opposites, or not. Okay? So, if two angles are vertical angles, what's the opposite of if two angles are vertical angles? If two angles are not vertical angles. So looking at my answer choices, the ones that say not vertical angles are going to be right here, right here. So, since those are the only options, I'm going to cross out A and C. And then it's supposed to be the opposite of they are congruent. It would be they are not congruent. So I keep reading. They are not congruent. Down here on letter D, that one says are congruent. Can't be that one. On number 6, given the following conditional statement, if lines are perpendicular and the lines intersect at a right angle, which of the following is the biconditional? Remember, biconditional is if and only if. Okay, so again, we're going to write this statement, if and only if, this statement. So the only one I see that does that would be letter C. If and only if, right in the middle there. Okay. Number 7, the new statement is which of the following? So I got my original statement. If an angle is bisected, then the angle now has two equal parts. The new statement, if an angle does not have two equal parts, then the angle is not bisected. What happened from the original to the new? Well, I see angle is bisected came over here and became opposite, right? Has two equal parts came over here, but it was opposite. So that's a switch and a flip, or a switch and opposite. So switching and opposite is going to be contrapositive. All right, on number 8, 4 kids went to a very unusual pet store. Each kid picked out a different animal to take home. Can you match the child with his or her new friend? No child has a pet that starts with the same letter as his or her name. So Dan can't have something starting with the letter D, so I'm going to X out dragon. Sarah can't have something starting with an S, so she can't have a sea serpent. Melody can't have something starting with an M, so that's a manatee cannot be. And Yuli cannot have a U word, so no unicorn. Alright, so number 1's done. Number 2, Dan doesn't have a pet that lives in the water. So do unicorns live in the water? No. Do sea serpents live in the water? They do, so Dan does not have that. And if you don't know what a manatee is a sea creature. I think it's this thing right here. Okay. So again, can't have that. So since Dan does not have a dragon, because it starts with the letter D, and he doesn't have a sea serpent or manatee because those are in the water, that means he can only have one option. So again, I look at this row of Dan, and in that row of Dan, there's only one space. So I have to put a circle there. So I put that circle there. And when I put a circle anywhere, I want to make sure I put X's to the left and the right and straight up and down. So the unicorn goes with Dan, not Sarah, not Melody. Okay? Just looking at my boxes, there's no rows or columns with one space, so I got to keep going here. Melody is allergic to smoke. Now, who would make smoke but a dragon, a fire-breathing dragon? So Melody doesn't have a dragon. She's allergic to that. Now I see Melody's row has one open space, so I put a circle there, and that means I got to put X's up and down, so I got to put them right there. All right, so Sarah and Yuli, we're not sure what's up with them. Number 4, Sarah loves to fly. Well, what flies, a manatee or a dragon? Well, a dragon. So Sarah is going to have the dragon, which means we put X's to the left and right and up and down from that circle. And that leaves Yuli with the manatee. Logic puzzle done. Number 9. We always start with these algebraic proofs with our given statement. So 5x plus 10 equal sign 3x minus 2, y. That's given. Okay? And our first step, we see those parentheses. What do we got to do first? We have to multiply into those parentheses, and that's called distribution. So 5x plus 10 equals 3 times 3, 9x. 3 times negative 2, minus 6. That was the distributive property. Then I have x on both sides, so I'm going to need to get rid of the smaller x. So I'm going to do minus 5x, minus 5x. These cancel out. I'm going to bring down 10 equals 4x minus 6. And that's the subtraction property of equality. Next step on the right, I need to get rid of the loner, which is minus 6. To get rid of minus 6, I need to add 6 to both sides. These cancel out, so I bring down, I got 16 equals 4x. And that was addition property of equality. And then to get rid of the 4 in front of x on the right-hand side, I need to divide. So divide by 4, divide by 4. 16 over 4 is 4 equals x. So again, since I divided, that's division property. Then my last step, I need to switch the order. It needs to be x equals 4. Anytime I switch the entire equation, that's called the symmetric property. Okay. Let's look at number 10. Now, all I've got to do is fill in the blanks. I always start with my given. So 7x plus 4 equals 10x minus 2. And that's given. First thing that was done was the parentheses went away. So, of course, that's distributive property. Then x was on both sides, so I had to get rid of the smaller x. That was subtraction